Hello. As you're starting to get more into the groove of tasting spirits, and we're getting to the end of week one, moving into week two, you're starting to taste more things. I thought I'd do a very short video just to give you some tips and tricks to help you when you're getting your head around the SAT. So, first tip, sounds very silly. Make sure you have a clean glass. You don't want any dust, or if you've had something else in it previously, that's what you're going to smell or taste. So it sounds silly, but make sure you have a clean glass because it will make a big difference. So I am going to do an example. So I'm going to be tasting Springbank 10-year-old, which is a Campbelltown single malt whiskey. It's at 46% ABV. So I'm just going to pour a little bit into the glass, roughly 15 ml. You'll get the hang of pouring 15 ml and not getting carried away, I promise. But when you're assessing for colour, one obviously holding up against different backgrounds is going to show different colours. So holding up against a piece of white paper is going to really help you to identify what colour you're going for. Now, you're remembering the SAT, you have colourless. This obviously isn't colourless. Then you have yellow, gold, amber and brown. A really good tip for assessing the difference between yellow, gold and amber is looking for yellow as a colour or any kind of orange. So if you see any orange, you're probably getting into amber territory. If there's no orange, you're either going to be yellow or gold. Now this is a little bit darker than the kind of straw colour you might see, which we'd probably call yellow, so I'm going to go ahead and say that this is gold. Now, when you come to smell the spirit, I always work in threes. So the first time you go to smell the spirit, put your nose in there, you're just going to get quite a lot of ethanol straight off the bat. This is because your nose isn't accustomed to the alcohol content, especially with spirits that are going to be 40% upwards very often. You need to get your nose used to getting in there and smelling alcohol. So the first time you do it, you're probably going to get a bit of alcohol. It might make your eyes water. You might do this, but that's okay. Take the glass away, breathe in, go back for round two. Second time, you might start to pick up flavours and aromas because your nose is getting more and more used to the ethanol, the alcohol, and you can begin to identify maybe there's a little bit of pear in there or some peach or whatever it might be. By the time you get back on the third go, you should be much more comfortable with your nose in a glass of alcohol, and that makes a big difference. The other thing to think is when you come to tasting, put your tongue into the roof of your mouth and then open your mouth and just hold your nose in the glass. It's sort of like opening a window and a door, getting a breeze through, really engaging the whole olfactory senses so that you can really begin to pick out different flavours and aromas in there. So don't like give it a big sniff because that's going to really overwhelm all of your senses, but try and just be a bit gentle with it. And if that's still too much, you can start a bit lower down. So you might, with particularly pronounced spirits, of which Scotch whisky is almost always pronounced, you should be able to smell something there. You're probably not going to be able to pick up lots and lots of flavour, but you better smell something. When you get to here, yeah, I can start to pick stuff up. Here, much more. And then that's the sweet spot of really being able to pull out lots and lots of flavours. So that will help you when it comes to aromas. Remember, you don't have to get in there first time and immediately start pulling out loads of different stuff. Like, give it time, give your nose time to adjust, and it will make a big difference. Finally, when you come to tasting the spirit, really good tip is to chew it. So hold it in your mouth, really kind of almost swill it around, but chew it. So that gives your tongue and your mouth a real opportunity to get a sense of texture, but it also allows you to coat all of your tongue and your taste buds and really get a real feel for the different flavours that are going to come through. So what does chewing look like? Yes, it looks a bit strange. I don't have a spittoon, but it is 3:30 in the afternoon, so I'm going to drink this one, but ideally you've got a spittoon for this. And then you swallow. If you can hold it in your mouth a while, you'll get more and more used to that. So it's made really juicy. That will really help you to understand and begin to pick out that kind of mouth feel. What's the texture like? And then when you get into things like, for example, cognac and rum, that's the opportunity to identify whether any sugar's been added. Does it have a kind of silky texture? And also with oak aged spirits where you might get a slight tannic grip that comes from the oak aging. That again will show through in that tasting moment. So it's a really good habit just to hold it in your mouth, really kind of experience the full textures and aromas and flavors of it before you swallow it. That's going to make a big difference. Once you've tasted it, pause and wait and kind of pay attention to the flavors and how they sustain. I always think a really good way of looking at this is with a song. So if you think some songs, they just stop, right? They just suddenly stop like that. That's the end of the song. So that's what we kind of call a simple spirit. If you think of the different flavors, they just go bang, done. That's a simple spirit. When you're trying to work out complexity, an interesting thing is, some songs might have a bass, a drum, a guitar, and some vocals. And then as the song comes to an end, the bass and the drums will stop. It's just guitar and vocals. Then the vocals stop and the guitar will fade out. And sometimes spirits do that. You might be picking up lots of rancio aromas of mushroom and forest floor, leather, oak. And then alongside that, you might get some fruity things. You might get a bit of coconut, maybe some baking spice, perhaps some melon, pear drops, pears, that kind of thing. But those things might not all persist at the same rate. Sometimes the fruit will disappear very quickly and you're left with just kind of oak and leather and those kind of darker tones. Sometimes it's the opposite, and that's okay, but that kind of begins to give you a sense of complexity. Some songs, everything stays playing and it just gets quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter until it disappears. And that's very complex spirits will do that. And often when you get into kind of old whiskies, old cognacs, things that are displaying these kind of rancio aromas that we call them, they'll often kind of fade out, but we say that persists. Those aromas and those flavors persist. So that just demonstrates a really good way of thinking about complexity when you're tasting spirits. And then once you've done all that, go back to it, because all of your senses will have become more accustomed to the spirit, and so the second time around you're probably going to be able to pick up things that you didn't the first time around. It's a really good exercise is once you've done your first tasting, go back to it and say, can I still pick out the things that I called first time around? Is there more? Are they more pronounced? Do they, I might have said pepper first time around. Second time I go back and think there is pepper, but this time it's a green pepper, or it's a bell pepper, or it's a jalapeno, and you can begin to get more specific, almost kind of going down the granularity and the detail. So second time around, you can begin to pick out other stuff. Another technique is to add water. Now, you might have a pipette, brilliant, in which case you can drop some pipettes in there. A method I like to use is, obviously you need clean hands for this. If you dip your finger into water, you can see that drops come off it. So if you do that, it's tricky with two hands, do that and then hold it over your glass. It means you can add very small amounts of water without overwhelming the spirit, like drowning the spirit with water. If you try and pour it, it's very difficult to get the right amount. It'll go all over the glass, gets everywhere. But that's quite a controlled way of just putting a bit of water into the glass that again will change the aroma because it will change the temperature of the spirit, but it'll also potentially open things up and you'll get different aromas and flavours once you add a little bit of water to it, which is absolutely happening there. Really good way. These are all really good habits and kind of tips and techniques to help you unlock your spirits tasting. Now, as you go through WSET, like ideally you're going to take level 2, maybe you'll get into level 3. All of these things will become second nature and you'll get your own style of tasting and what really works for you. Like how do you pick out those aromas? How are you really pulling on those flavors? How are you identifying stuff? And you'll absolutely figure that all out. It just takes a bit of time and practice, but that's why we're here. That's why I can kind of give you a few tips and techniques before you dive into it. And so yeah, hopefully that is useful and you're all enjoying the tastings. And next week, when you get into more spirits, moving away from vodka, which is quite a hard thing to taste, so don't worry. But when we're getting into fruit spirits and we're getting into rums and whiskies and really pronounced things with lots of flavour, lots and lots of things going on, then this will prove really helpful. So I hope that was useful. Any questions, please just comment underneath this or drop me a note or come into a live chat and we can talk about it. But hopefully it's beneficial. Good luck with the tastings. I think it's one of the best parts about WSET using the SAT, and good luck.